mean, I have mine. So we run off a few extras, if you don't mind. Okay. Yeah, okay, so here, this is it. Okay. So, how many people would like this of Shop Type V? Anybody else want it? Post shop. All right. So, what? You don't have the Shop Type V either. You want it? No. You know what? Just make another. Right, but right. So run off like make like 5 copies of that. That will be enough. Oh wow! Look who's here from Detroit. All right. So nice to see you. Okay. When did you come down? Yeah. I went to see my grandchildren there, my brother, my sister, lots of. And right, well, she went for 3 days. Well, she ended up 4. But yes, but we did. I tied up the whole time. Yeah. Okay, Rabbi Bree, I put your sheet down. Okay, so guys, I have to turn the computer on for anybody who's still listening. So, just a sec. Hold on. Sorry. Okay, it says recording, so it is on. Okay. What we're going to do today, I'm going to explain to you, after Shakai Tzvi passed away, that wasn't the end of the movement to looking for a Mashiach. They wanted some sort of a savior to come, especially this follows of those terrible Chmielnitsky attacks upon the Jews, which lasted, even though it's called Tach V'Tat, 1648, 1649, it continued into the 1650s. So it was, it lasted for quite a while. The bulk of the fighting did begin like in the Ukraine, in parts of Poland, but it did spread then to Lithuania. All right. Okay, excellent. So I'll just review a bit for you. Shakai Tzvi. Shakai Tzvi rose. Why did he have such a huge following? But again, it was after a very demoralizing time period in Jewish history, in that whole Polish, Ukraine area, but other parts of the world as well. They were like horrified, that these terrible attacks that come upon these defenseless Jews. Okay, here we have extra copies of the thing about Shakai Tzvi. This is my original. Okay. Okay. Well, I know you go. It's up to you to like it. Okay. All right. Okay. And anybody else wants to shop my Tzvi here? You need one? Okay. No, I've done this past year, but to make everything flow so nicely, you want to come and stay? Yes.
Am I a prisoner here?
You're not a prisoner. No. Gay gesund. All right, maybe miss some in the future. All right. It's Jewish history, and I'm talking about the time period in the 17th century going on. Before. Yeah, before. We don't go back hundreds of years, so there are more and more people though who are living to the age of 100. Like it's amazing, but right, most of us, are definitely under that. All right, so let me just briefly go over the notes about the Shabtai Tzvi, so you know what happened. In other words, part of it you'll see why there will be a turn eventually among certain Rabbanim against Kabbalah, because this is what influences and motivates these Mashiach Sheker, these false messiahs, to rise to the fore. They are going to immerse themselves in the study of Kabbalah, and unfortunately, then it's going to go through their head. Oh, they are the Redeemer. where they're going to bring, a future good times to the people, in suffering and throughout Europe. Um, so whatever. He was born actually on Tisha B'Av. So, that was like unique and special because there was a tradition that the Mashiach would be born on Tisha B'Av. He was born in the year 1626. He came from the city of Smyrna, which is Turkey, uh, and then was part of the Ottoman Empire. Uh, and the family, came originally from Spain, Portugal. Okay, so he first, as all good Jewish boys, so he did start studying, obviously Chumash and Talmud, but he eventually, started studying Kabbalah. Here, let me just give you here. This is, this is what we're doing right now. Long and makes sense. All right. Um, I mean, you'll see he was obviously a little off, to say the least. But he had all these people who followed him. They thought he was a bona fide Mashiach. So he said in the Zohar, obviously, other Kabbalistic commentaries. Apparently, he's very handsome young man, and he was a born leader. Some people do; they just have that innate ability to lead others. And he started having a group of men, sort of several keys. And he started initiating, teaching them about the secrets of the Kabbalah. And they thought that this man is definitely destined for great stuff. Also, in fact, he thought he was such an unusual and special person that he shouldn't even marry. Anyway, in the year 1648, okay, that's when those wrote again, this Romantic massacres began. But again, he's in Turkey. He's not in Poland. So he did something really unusual. I mean, even though people are tolerance for this. So he comes to shul with a Sefer Torah and sets up some sort of a makeshift, chuppah, and he marries himself to the Torah. All right, that Isaiah is right. So this is where he sort of begins his messing career. Well, the people in Smyrna had had enough of this guy, so they actually throw him out. Right? But he has this started off with this very small group of followers, but wherever he goes, he's considered like this wonder person, and more adherents, start following him. Followed him. Well, eventually it was in the thousands, tens of thousands. Eventually, yes. That's why he's so well known. I'm going to mention to you the names of some other people who worked at Mashiach, false messiahs. You may or may not have heard of their names. They're not as well known, but he really had, until literally thousands, tens of thousands of people eventually came to believe that he was the Mashiach and that he's going to bring this great redemption and bring them all back to the land of Israel. So then, all right, after leaving Smyrna, he goes to Salonika. Salonika is what's called Greece, right? And there, that's where he has his marriage ceremony, whatever. So, and they get rid of him. All right. And then eventually he comes to Cairo. So now he's in Egypt. And he finds there a benefactor, very, very wealthy man. His name is Levi. And he used to have a group of men, who would learn in his house. Again, as a wealthy person, he was about tzedakah. So he decides to send Shabtai to be as his emissary to go to Israel to distribute funds. Now another man comes, also colorful figure. His name is called Nathan of Gaza, and he said that he was a Navi and into the future, and so he makes this big announcement that it's going to be this reincarnation of Eliyahu, Hanavi, and then to announce that Shabtai is the Mashiach. it seems hard to us to fathom reading this now, how people could be so duped, but if your lives are so utterly miserable, and you feel like you're being attacked, from all sides, and, your homes are being burned and demolished, you're looking for salvation, from some sort. And again, don't forget, remember, he was this very dynamic individual, Jacques Sibi. Uh, he had charisma, and people began truly believing that he was the Mashiach. Um, so, remember, this is announced in the city of Yerushalayim, and again, there's a belief, that when Mashiach comes, he will come forth to Yerushalayim. So, it's like further proof that indeed this man, is the Mashiach. Okay. This is happening around probably in the 1650s. I don't have an exact year. Yes, right after those terrible massacres, the summer massacres, 48, 49, which I told you continued for a 10-year period. It went to up to like 1658. Right. So it was, yeah. Well, his family came from there. Right. Yeah. Mm. Yes. Right. Because they originally were from Germany. Right. I mean, obviously it had a tremendous effect, but we're talking about almost 200 years after that. So it's the most immediate effect. Why? But from 1492 down to, we're talking about 1640, 1655. So it's closer, closer. Yes, 150 years. And it's more the reason. Why did these people follow it? Because they were suffering. When he started, with the Polish Jews, forget whatever was motivating him. It's why did all these people believe that this man was in fact the Mashiach? And I think that's the more important question to try to understand that. Okay, so then he comes back, to Cairo, and again, it's starting to spread. They now have the Mashiach. And don't forget the so-called, Yovi man. Gaza, indeed, he's the reincarnation of the being. He is now announcing that this man, in fact, is the Mashiach. And then there's a story that's also floating around Europe at this time. It's a young girl, her name is Sarah, and she says her parents had been murdered, and she says, well, her father appeared to her in a dream and said that she was destined to be the bride of the Messiah. Well, this they naturally had to introduce her to Shaddai, and he does in fact marry her. Okay. Whatever. Now he's got this very rich patron, right? This Halebi in Cairo. He's got a wife who's also, saying that he is the Mashiach, and this corroboration of this so-called prophet, this nation of Gaza. So he himself now says, "Yes, I am the." And this was greeted throughout Europe with, I mean, it spread even to Western Europe. The community in Amsterdam had a lot of adherence to Shaddai. And people were like, oh yes, our miserable lives are going to come to an end, that we're going to have this glorious beginning of a wonderful, lives ahead of us, and that we will all return to live in the land of Israel. So as people actually sold their possessions, or started gathering up, packing up, thinking it was imminent that they were about to return to Eretz Israel and live there. There also was belief, actually, among Christian, mystics, that the year 1666 would be the coming of of course, for them, it's the second coming of the Messiah. So, like, all these various forces are all, conflating. They're all coming together, as if to prove the veracity that indeed this man is the Mashiach. So he decides he's going to go to Constantinople, which is, of course, capital of the Ottoman Empire. And for sure, when, obviously, there must be special glowing from his face, when the Sultan will see him, he will indeed recognize him, right? That he is the Mashiach. Well, he gets there, he's thrown into prison. So like, who is this nut who's coming here? I'm going to step down from my position, and this man's going to take over. But he had a certain measure of freedom inside prison, so people could still come and without some gatherings. Okay. But I would say that there was a particular interest in the Jews of Poland, again, because they had just suffering, from those terrible massacres. And so he himself suggests this. Well, send me somebody to test me to see, in fact, that I am the Mashiach. So there's this man's name is Nehemiah Cohen. Cole is a Jew. And he doesn't believe that he is in fact. So he interviews him, poses questions to him, and he comes back and said, "No, this man is not the Mashiach." Okay, so already they're getting cracks are developing, in this man's, story. And then eventually he's brought before the Sultan, like semi-trial, and he can't really prove that he's a Mashiach. So, the Sultan wants to give him the death penalty. But then he said, "Oh, I want to convert to Islam." Can you imagine? This is a Mashiach that convert to another religion. So all of these Jews, all these thousands, tens of thousands of Jews, hoped that the man would just demolish, because, if you read the Chumash when it talks about it, when the Jews come in, Sheker, myths, and how can you prove? Because they will become apostate. They will act, or they will tell you to do things against Jewish law. I mean, this is the worst. You're going to convert, to another religion. Obviously, the time had not yet come, right? For that we will be redeemed, and all of us should return to Israel. He had this mixture of beliefs. Some came from Christianity, some up Islam, whatever. And people he still had followers, still had adherents. So it's so wow for this whole thing to totally calm down and for people to rid themselves. That's why we're going to talk today with the new thing I handed out, that there were other people who rose before, not as famous as Shaddai, but they also had adherents and believed that they were also the Shia. Okay, this actually became a sect within Islam. It's called the Donmeh. It's written there, it's Donmeh, and it exists. I don't know if it still exists today, but it did exist for hundreds of years. Right, these people who, they convert, they are Muslim, but they've got these strange beliefs. They also still somehow think that Shaddai is a great person. Okay, that's what Shaddai means. So it's after, that's already in the 1500s. That's right. So the Reformation and Catholicism, and Poland is a Catholic country. But remember, he personally is not coming from Poland. He's coming from Turkey, he was brought up under the Ottoman Empire. But it was the Jews in Poland who were suffering psychologically, terrible conditions they had just, come through. And they were the ones who were so very, very receptive to him. I told you, he had adherents all the way as far away as in Amsterdam, who thought he was a miraculous person, obviously their leaders there, persuaded them of ultimately of that belief. But it was the Jews of Poland who, that's where he had most followers. Yes. Yeah, it's called Donmeh, Donmeh. All right. If you have your ShopTide TV papers still in your folders, I have it there on the last page 5, right, when it did ShopTide TV. Okay, so now I'm going to bring you up to what else happened. Okay, so now if you have your sheets that are marked post-Sabbath individuals, okay, we're going to talk about those individuals. Let me just put this away and take this out. Okay, so I'll sort of like read it with you and you'll follow and I'll add things as I get more info. Yes. Oh, you don't have this? I didn't read it out. Post-Sabbath. Oh, you have it next? Oh, I did. I was working on it yesterday afternoon, preparing for you guys. Okay, but since then, I've done more research. I've even more information, to add. Okay, with Shabtai Tzadik's conversion to Islam, he completely disappeared from the scene of Jewish life. And he converted. So fears arose, you can imagine, among the religious community, the rabbinic leaders, that these hopes that he had stirred up in the people, right? The redemption is imminent, is about to arrive, that they would not soon be forgotten. And in fact, that was true. I mean, their fears were absolutely accurate. And these other false messiahs, not as popular, not as well, not as far spread as Shabtai Tzvi, but they do make an impact on certain individuals and communities. Now the Rabbanim, they're looking at it. They have to protect, halacha. They have to protect, teach the people what is the proper mode of conduct, and also there's going to be a lot of criticism now about the study of Kabbalah. I would say Kabbalah from its inception, not from Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, from Spain, when it discovered the Zohar, there has always been, so to speak, a tug of war between those who follow Kabbalah and those who say it's a bunch of punk. So, of which I am part of that. Eventually, it's going to be coming to two groups: the Hasidim versus the Misnagdim. But we're not there yet. That's more into the 18th century. But there was this, so to speak, this conflict between traditional rabbinic thought, mode of study, stress on the Gemara and Halacha, and mysticism. Although remember, we did a lot of the very famous Rabbanim, from the prior, century. A lot of them did study Kabbalah, but they used it to, so to speak, elucidate, to illuminate their understanding of halacha. But if you're only studying Kabbalah in and of itself, this is what's being criticized, because this can lead to, this delusion of, which led to the rise of the messianic movements. So for the next 2 generations, a crop of false prophets arose. And they all claimed, I'll explain how, they all say that they were the actual followers, the descendants of Shabtai Tzvi, and that, so to speak, his aura has now descended upon them, and they are authentic, messengers. And it travels throughout Europe, parts of North Africa, and Israel. Each with a message more bizarre than the others. Find out. And each of them, there were certain adherents within the Jewish community that did believe, yes, in fact, these men are the personification of the Mashiach. No, this is an earlier time period. Yes, it's a different time period. That's he's from Toledo, so he was from Spain. I don't know, combo, not so much. I don't think so. But whatever. But he's from a much earlier, time period. Okay, but what happened is, unfortunately, these men were out spouting the fact that they're the Mashiach. They then are put into Cherem by the bona fide Rabbanim of that period, and then they end up converting to Islam and some even to Christianity. That was the end of them. One of them is a man, his name is Jacob Burrito. I looked at more information about him. So the basic information that he proclaimed that he was the son of Shabtai Tzvi. How did he start claiming this? Oh, he had a sister who was one of Shabtai Tzvi's last wives. I never knew he had so many wives. I guess after Sora died, he married other women. Anyway, so this Jacob Carrito's sister again was the wife. Now, why are you saying that he is the son? That really, so his sister actually is the one who convinces him, Shabtai Tzvi passes away, she comes back, and he's from Salonika, he's Greece, and he's, she convinces him that Shabtai Tzvi's soul has entered into Jacob Carrito, Shabtai Tzvi. Okay, and he's going to continue this messianic, to the Jews of the world. Well, he's also put into Cherem, and eventually his followers too, they convert to Islam. I don't know why they thought that was an acceptable thing to do. Whatever, I don't know. There obviously was more, in their mind. So here it's a little bit more info that I found. First of all, Carrito means the beloved, right? He had a different last name, but Carrito is beloved. His dates are, we don't know 100%, but he was born around the year 1650, and he died in the year 1690. So he died at 40 years. And it was in 1683 that there was a massive movement, people following him who then convert Islam. And they also then will join that Gunmeh sect, right? And that will actually help to grow that in its numbers. Okay. Eventually he goes to Mecca. Once in your lifetime, go to Mecca. That was in the year 1688, and he eventually dies in Egypt. We don't know that happened. Obviously, there are all sorts of illnesses in those days. Here's the name of another false Messiah, again, a Mashiach checker. His name was Nehemiah Chayum. He was a scholar, was a persuasive preacher, and he traveled around Western Europe, agitating a type of Judaism close to Christianity. Now, I looked him up in the Encyclopedia Judaica, which is a very scholarly work. They're not talking there about anything conversion to Christianity. They talk more about the Islam. So, anyway, this is what I learned from there. Then also born around 1655, but he lived longer. He lived to 1730. He was actually born in Egypt, but his family then moved. He actually then formative years were in Israel, in Shechem, that's today's Nablus, and Yerushalayim, where he received his education. When he's 18 years old, he goes back to Sarajevo. So he came from the Balkan of Europe. And he travels throughout that region, proclaiming again that he was reincarnation of the Mashiach. 1695, he went back again to Shechem. He sort of, every few years, he was sort of like relocating himself, in that whole Middle East area. Again, obviously, in the year 1714, the Rabbanim had enough of him. He's put into Cherem, and eventually dies somewhere in North Africa. So, again, these people are not as famous, as well known as Shabtai Tzvi, but again, this yearning for a Mashiach who is always bring the final redemption and return of all, to Israel, it still lingers, Jewish people. All right. And now the bottom of that page, what it said the rabbis who fought the dangers of Sabbath and heresy were often unable to distinguish between proper and improper types of mysticism. Up until this, I mean, Kabbalah was considered a bona fide way of studying Torah, another avenue that you could grow closer to God through the study of Kabbalah. But now they see the danger of studying Kabbalah because it's going to lead to strange modes of thinking. So there's not going to be a dispute, among the rabbinic community. This is really sad because you all know this, man. It said their attacks even reached this great Rav, Rabbi Moshe Chaim Luzzatto, that's the Ramchal. You may have heard of him. His book that he wrote eventually is very famous and is studied, by Jews, from Jews all over the world. And he became the innocent victim of this attitude that it was wrong, dangerous to study Kabbalah. Okay. He was born in Padua, Italy, where Jews and Christians, would often mingle together. It's more of a cosmopolitan city. And he had very good, again, a young boy will always learn, of course, on Chumash, and then Talmud. And always great emphasis, on the Torah, the Tanakh, as being the basis for the Jewish religion. But he had a great affinity for language, especially the Hebrew language, and he turned to poetry to express, his feelings. And he started writing those secular verse because I was supposed to the attention of the requirement surrounding on it. Now, if you'll remember, we go back to the days, like that golden age of the Jews in Spain, right, under Muslim rule. And they too wrote very beautiful secular poetry. And I mean, in addition to religious writings, but they did devote a lot of their time to this beautiful, talk about nature and, describing everything in very beautiful terms. And it was considered okay, in that time period. But now we have the influence of many, many years have gone by. And again, because of this fear of what, turning to other modes of study, what they can do to the individual Jew psyche, and that it's potentially dangerous. But he saw a deeper meaning in Yahadus through the study of the Zohar, that's the preeminent work of Kabbalah. He also studied, obviously, the works of the Ari, who is called Lurianic, Kabbalah, Luria, that's the name of the Ari. And he too, he's going to have a small group of followers around him, but not for nefarious purposes, like those who follow Shabtai Tzvi or those other two men, whose names I just mentioned. I mean, they're learning it, still with a great love of Torah and knowledge of the Talmud, but this is like another dimension, another means to study to enhance their understanding of Hashem, and the world of Judaism. But the rabbis were very, very concerned about it. I mean, you can understand what they had seen these other small groups of followers. Look how they mushroomed, came to belief in a false Messiah. They don't want to take chances with this young man. So they actually forbidden them to do any more writings. Apparently, he was a very prolific writer and published books and articles. And they eventually burned all those writings of Nebuch she had left with them. Now, one of the chief people who criticized him was the Yavitz. The Yavitz is Rabbi Yaakov Emden. He was the son of Rabbi Ashkenazi, right? And the Tzvi Ashkenazi was called Tzvi. Anyway, so the Yavitz gets involved with his campaign to discredit the Ramchal and all his, right? Ramchal was just a preacher. And there's another Rav who gets involved. His name is Rabbi Yaakov Hagis from Altona, from this region. And And actually, in the year 1734, his books were banned. Here this was a genuine, observant Jew. He just was trying to find his path to Hashem through a different derech than was then accepted. Part of their reasoning why they were criticizing him, he started turning to Kabbalah when he was still a young man. You should have said what until you were a more mature individual. Sort of reminds me of the Rambam's Morin Nevilkin guide to the perplexed, which also they say like you can start setting it to 40 years old. You first have to be well grounded in the Torah, in the Talmud, and then you could start studying these other philosophic types of works. He goes into Amsterdam, Berlin, but they don't receive him very well in these places. And at the age of 40, he actually goes to live in Israel. He started, continuing his writings there, but he was living in Tveria, but there was a plague there, and he died of that plague. And again, he was a very young man, and he's buried near the grave of Rabbi Akiva. So should you ever go to Tveria, and someone directs you to where Rabbi Akiva is buried, you will also see the Ramchal place is nearby. All right, now he's famous though because he wrote this work, which obviously did survive, was not totally burned, which is called Mesilat Yesharim, the Path of the Righteous. And I want to copy it. And people say the reason why we know it so well down to this age is like 150 years after his death. The Musar, sort of like revive the study, of these ethical writings. That's what they are, the ethics and morals. And that's why we still have this missing relationship. Otherwise, it's sort of like brushed aside for a long, long period of time. It's based actually on the Chavot, a much older work that's from the 11th century that Rabbi Bachya ibn Pakuda had written, also. Okay, and some people, to this day will study that. But again, it's all because of that revival of Musar that these books, become so well known. Just an aside, he had a tremendous grasp of the Hebrew poetry. He grew very, very beautiful Hebrew, and he actually apparently had written a book, like a lexicon, like a dictionary of sorts, and grammar. But if you know your dictum, I mean, I can look at a Hebrew word and I can pick out the truth, because it was so drilled into me. I know how to do that. Again, this is really just a very unfortunate story that involved this turning against the study of Kabbalah. And the Brahman Chal, he's obviously he's greatly admired in this day, certainly a proper religious Jew, but they were just so worried that the study of Kabbalah would lead to these strange ideas, Shiach Sheker, now we're going to learn about another individual who actually you may not have heard of him, but he really did gain a lot of influence. We're now back in Poland. What's going on? Somebody's going to, so to speak, interpret Judaism, but a formed way. And again, this is happening in Poland. This is now already into the 18th century. We're learning about Jacob Frank. So starting around the year 1740, he appeared, in that part of the world, southern Poland. It's interesting. The Kabbalist influence, in the northern parts of Poland, Lithuania, tremendous emphasis on learning, studying of the Talmud. But in the southern Poland, it was somewhat different. They were more open. They were more receptive to other new nodes of learning. I'll develop that. So and while he was there, while he was in Wandering, he picks up a lot of strange ideas from some of those followers of Shabtai Tzvi who were still floating around. So now he claims that he is the reincarnation of Shabtai Tzvi, and that the time for redemption is about to come. But this is really warped. How is he going to bring about the redemption? Only if we now start, following all the evil practices of the world, to live to the lowest level of Tuma, right? And, and that way, just like Jews in Mitzrayim, where they finally redeemed because they were at that almost at that lowest level of Tuma. So Hashem says, oh, if I don't redeem at this point, they will be forever lost. So this was his reasoning. So he engaged in all these horrible, immoral practices, like orgies, whatever, totally antithesis of proper Judaism. And you can imagine how the Rabbanim viewed this man, Jacob Frank. And I mean, even most of the Jewish people at that time were just shocked. It was one thing that we had these crazy people thinking they were wandering around thinking they were Shia, but until they converted, they were following, Judaism. But this man was really wacko. And it says here that they actually became eventually converts to Catholicism. You have to understand, Poland is a Catholic country. Okay, and eventually, not only that, you find this with a lot of apostate people, who leave Judaism and adopt another religion. They turn against the Jews, and he started even bringing that horrible accusation of the blood libel, ritual murder, and accusing the Jews that they, in fact, yes, they were engaged in such behavior. I know it's horrible. I mean, it's still around today. So eventually he's forced to leave Poland. I mean, both of the Jews there have enough of these children. Even the Christian church I didn't fully believe him. Because he had come to them, to one of the cardinals, and he said, well, if you would accept me, and part of the church, I will bring all the rest of the Jews to come to convert to Catholicism, but they saw this wasn't happening. So they also, turned against him. He's the last one of these Mashiach, these false messiahs, who claimed again this link with Shabtai Tzvi to exist. There might have been a few minor people, after him, but he's the last of them. And his followers are called Frankists, following Jacob Frank. Okay. So just a few bits of information that I picked up about him. He dies, by the way, in the year 1791. 1757, he calls the tradition of public debate. That's from medieval periods, where rabbis would have to engage in debate with Christian clerics to see, who really, are the inheritors of the truth. And then 1759, there was the second debate. But eventually, I mean, people saw his doctrine, was totally idiotic. But 500 of his followers were baptized, right, in Catholicism in the city of Lugol. He's eventually arrested and he is in prison. And that is the end of Jacob Frank. So, even though, everyone hears of Shabtai Tzvi and impact, but his impact continued right into that 18th, the beginning part of that 18th century, because people are still like breaking at straws that a redeemer will arise, who will, lead them to, to a beautiful life in the land of Israel. And they're always disappointed. Well, I see that these men themselves, they don't have any proper followers, large enough to protect them, and then that's what really, really warped ways. Okay, so we finished this. I have another one. We'll just start it because I think time is up. And now I'm going to talk about the rise of the black community, and then oh, okay, yeah. So yes, right. Yes, I think right. Well, that the Catholic Church, right, with the Trinity, you said, right, that's very problematic, for some people to accept that. But I think it's more the fact that they themselves came from the East, and that's why they turn more, to Islam. This Frank, I have to look it up. He came from originally, but he obviously, what was definitely close to the Catholic world, and that's why eventually he converts to become a Catholic. Yes. No, he decided. Well, what happened was the Sultan, well, I guess maybe the Sultan gave him no choice. That I'm going to put you to death. you know. Mm, that's wishful thinking. I think no, no. He was definitely off, mentally off, and I'm sorry to say, and that's why they brought him so virulently against him. Yeah. Well, it's I don't know. Do you want to compare? I'm not. Um, the time was not right yet for a mass return. To Israel, and the Jews were they were just impoverished. They couldn't. I mean, he didn't give any practical things, hiring ships, or no, they just talked about it in general terms. Well, there are a lot of practicalities involved with picking yourself up from one place to another. Uh, so it sounded wonderful, but obviously did not come to play. All right, now we're going to talk about these itinerant, people traveling preachers who came to the fore in this time period. It could be there was some prior to this also. You have to understand all those great yeshivas that we talk about, such as Lubavitch and Krakow, the ones in Lithuania. You know, this is such a time of terrible upheaval. There was destruction. Um, you know, the people were impoverished at this time period. I mean, how many could sit and devote themselves to studying, Gemara? So they're looking for something else, and that's why it led to the false messiahs coming to the fore, and also what will lead eventually to the Hasidic movement. So I, won't say anything more. But that's it's all sort of tied together. So you have to I come very misnogish family from Lithuania. So we don't believe at all in studying Kabbalah and for following a side of their rabbis. Any case, so I'll just read a little, all right, and then we'll talk. Okay, so this is talking about the Maggid or the Baal Shem. They're two slightly different individuals. Okay, so the Jews of Europe at the end of that 17th century and the beginning of the 18th still labored under the effects of the misfortunes they had already suffered. Again, they were coming out the mid-century from those terrible Khmelnytsky massacres. And then they're going through a time of upheaval with believing that this crazy man, the Shaphat Tzvi, is the Messiah, and going to bring the final redemption, and then their hopes are all shattered. And they're looking for something. They're looking for somebody who's going to bring them great solace, to their again. There's some so low spiritual. That's the problem. Not just also that there's poverty, but their spirits have taken such a beating. They need somebody to somehow lift them up. All right. First of all, just turning to Germany or Central Europe in general, they're coming out of the 17th century. What have they had? First of all, many are living out in ghettos. There's terrible conditions, crowded, filth, disease. They were the worst, usually neighborhoods in a particular city. Then there's the 30 Years' Wars. That's 1618 to 1648. And then we have they wrote Takapakata 1648, really goes all the way to 1558, the devastation of the Chmielnicki massacres. And they see no end in sight. They don't see that light at the end of the tunnel. That's what they're looking for. That's what led to the growth of this whole Messiah. The Jew, the 18, he felt that Judaism, which he lived, wasn't giving him enough spiritual strength. Not all of them could sit and study hours a day in a yeshiva and devote themselves to it. So they're yearning for something else. And as a result, there's going to arise these itinerant preachers who will, be giving them sermons trying to get their spirits up. And now people are also there. They're also being critical now of the rabbinic leaders, that they're not being attentive to their needs. In addition to the fact that they're so poverty stricken, they're surrounded with great hatred. You're not even today, I feel somehow, living in a Jewish community, I'm surrounded really just by other observant Jews, but there's a whole world out there of ugliness, and it is coming to the fore now. And so we'll just conclude with this paragraph as a second paragraph. So the Polish state, first of all, part of the problem is that the Polish state is starting to disintegrate and will totally come to an end at the end of the 18th century. Great. So they're living under troubled, political, and the kings didn't really have power over everything. The noblemen, all grasping things for themselves. The parliament can't rise at any decision. Some of the princes were even under the pay of Poland's enemies, that was Germany and Russia, right? And the peasants, as we know, the serfs, were oppressed. Of course, and they're the majority. And at this time, it's the middle class and the clergy, you can at least thank the church, who managed to persecute the Jews. And we'll learn, next time I'll continue this and explain exactly what was happening in those days. So it's good to see all of you. Hope you are all well, stay healthy, and we should meet under good times to come. Yes, Hashem. My pleasure. Let me just turn this off.